You know, I think Prop 20 is the physical manifestation of Californians' love for the coast. The coast is everybody's backyard, right? And all of these people from all over California came together in 1972 in this amazing campaign to protect their backyard.
The power of the people to rally together and achieve great things. I still think of it as the ultimate political success story in California, if not in the nation, Proposition 20.
It changed the face of California forever.
So back in the late 60s and early 70s, the face of California was changing extremely rapidly and not for the better.
Well, a key moment was the 1969 Santa Barbara oil spill. I mean, that ignited the environmental movement in California, and maybe you could say even nationally and partly worldwide.
I was in the end of my high school years in 1969 when the oil spill hit, and the impact that happened so quickly, and that it was this helpless feeling that all this oil is spilling on the beach and the birds and all the damage that occurred. I think that was a wide-eyed, open awakening to see that the coast was fragile.
I remember PG&E at the time, at a hearing in Sacramento, which I attended, they wanted to build a nuclear power plant every 20 miles along the California coast. I mean, they presented that plan in front of Charlie Warren, who's the head of the Assembly Natural Resources Committee. There was a proposed LNG plant in Santa Barbara County. At Point Conception, I think it's called, like one of the most dangerous parts of the coast in terms of currents and everything. And they were going to put an LNG terminal there.
Development was largely the province of local governments, cities and counties. And all you need to get a project approved at the local level is basically 3 votes on a Tuesday. And so, by and large, California was getting rapidly developed and going through an incredible transformation at the ad hoc discretion of several dozen cities and counties that were just primarily concerned with increasing their tax base as opposed to protecting their natural resources.
In Southern California, of course, Malibu is the most glaring example of that, where homes were literally built on the sand. And then people eventually resorted to using bulldozers to push sand up against them, put rock revetments, riprap to protect their homes.
Coastal cities were just starting in development, that phase. Orange County accepted development. Development was king. The Irvine Company that controlled a lot of our coastal resources controlled things, and no one put a stop to it. Huntington Harbor, which is used to be a part of the whole wetland system in California, that was built without a murmur.
Pete McCloskey was involved in stopping the Rockefeller family from leveling off the top of San Bruno Mountain. They were going to level off the top of the mountain and then build condos up on top of the mountain on the mesa. And they were going to take the dirt from all that they had leveled off on conveyor belts down over the freeway to fill the bay so they could build more houses in the bay. That's the kind of thinking that was going on.
People on the coast were really galvanized. They were really concerned and wanted to do something to protect the coast. And so they did what most movements do, is they reached out to elected officials and they tried to get a coastal protection law passed.
John Dunlap was a state legislator, state assemblyman. He was elected at the same time I was, and we were very good friends because we had been active in the Democratic Party before. He was represented the Napa, Sonoma area, and a development along the Sonoma coast, Sea Ranch. Beautiful development proposed, but it was going to eliminate the public's right to go into that area, to go to the beaches. And John Dunlap and I had been working together on legislation. And so John Dunlap was talking to me about it, and I said, well, we ought to do something about it. The first bill we put in was my bill having to do with that 10 miles. And it didn't get anywhere. So the next year we tried again. And one of the important people in this whole process was Ellen Stern Harris. And Ellen was a good friend of mine. And so I told her about this, and she said, well, you know what you ought to do? You ought to do something for the entire coast. And I had never thought about that. So we turned our attention to trying to develop a proposal that would protect the coastal area to the public all up and down the coast.
And they were successful in getting a bill introduced for 3 years running. But every year, the special interests opposed to that bill were successful in killing it. The oil industry, the real estate industry, power companies, railroads.
The coast of California is an extraordinarily valuable piece of real estate, and therefore there was very powerful forces in Sacramento that worked very hard to make sure that they could keep control for the California coast to themselves and make the most amount of money, because it was probably one of the most valuable pieces of real estate on planet Earth.
Developers are wealthy, and they influence politicians to make decisions in Sacramento.
Peter Douglas has told some pretty colorful stories about the lengths that those entities went to kill the bill. In one instance, a key vote in a Senate committee didn't show up to a hearing, and people were frantically calling around and trying to find him. And it turned out that he was home at his ranch accepting the delivery of a racehorse that was a gift from one of the entities that was opposed to the bill. So that bill died in that committee, and that's just an example of the kind of pressure and political shenanigans that went on to try and prevent the legislature from passing a coastal protection bill.
And when we had the hearing in the state Senate in the third year, we had one Democratic member of the Senate was not there. So the committee was originally 5 people. There were only 4 people there, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. The Democrats voted for it, the Republicans did not vote for it, and so the bill failed. So when that occurred, we decided we had to go to the initiative.
There were a lot of essential players in the success of Prop 20, but there were 2 people without whom I would argue the campaign would not have been a success. And those 2 people are Peter Douglas and Janet Adams.
Peter Douglas was a very close friend of mine. He was introduced to me as a UCLA law school graduate by Rowan Klein, who was on my staff at that time. I can remember that he said, well, I'd like you to meet Peter Douglas. And we had lunch together, and I liked him. And I suggested he join our staff.
I had determined never to go into politics or work in politics. But after a couple hours with Alan, I really liked the guy. And I thought this would be a wonderful person to work with. He's a humanist, smart, not arrogant, not pretentious, and not really political.
And when Alan Cerroti hired him and he moved to Sacramento, the first bill that he dropped on Peter's desk was the coastal bill. And he said, your job this year is to get this bill through. And so Peter learned on the job about coastal protection and all of the political forces swirling around coastal development proposals.
I mean, he was a young staff person in Sacramento was frustrated by the fact that they were unable to pass the legislation to protect the coast because of the pressure and power of vested interests that were at the time utilities and oil companies. And so he crafted the language of the initiative to take the issue to the people, to the public, at a time where grassroots activism and environmental awareness were exploding across the planet, but especially in California.
And it was going very slow. And I remember calling the attorney for the Coastal Alliance saying, Ray, what's going on here? I haven't seen any drafts of the Coastal Initiative. And he said, well, we're not really doing much. I said, how about getting together this Saturday? And so we did. We met in his law firm in San Francisco and wrote the initiative in one morning.
The experience of working that bill and working with the proponents for that bill is what set him up to be such a key force in the Prop 20 campaign itself, because he had been in the trenches in the legislature trying to get the bill passed. And by the time the initiative came around, he was all in.
Janet Adams took on the responsibility of the campaign, and she did a terrific job.
And then around that time, I guess I met the great Janet Adams, who was a real force of nature, a real dynamo, all right? Out of her house in Woodside, I mean, Janet just ran the state. I mean, Janet did not know how to take no for an answer, right? And she was determined she would do this, and she just organized this army of volunteers statewide.
She was a super savvy professional political consultant who ran campaigns at a time when that was very much still a man's world. And I just think it's worth taking a moment here to acknowledge that the person who was tasked with getting Prop 20 across the line in 1972 was a woman. And that was an unusual thing. And it was also just an illustration of how talented she was. She was the person responsible for its success or failure. Basically, the buck stopped with Janet.
Prop 20, of course, it was a total grassroots campaign to get it on the ballot.
Basically, I drove my VW van up to Janet Adams' house and interviewed with her, and she had received some money from the widow of the Folgers coffee fortune, and hired me to jump in my VW van and drive the coast of California and offer like $5,000 checks to grassroots environmental leaders up and down the coast to, one, create storefront ecology centers, and secondly, to try to encourage them to, within their city or county, to launch efforts to gather the signatures necessary to put the Coastal Initiative on the ballot.
You know, that particular petition drive was notable because it was a true citizens petition. It was not paid signature gatherers getting all these signatures. It was, do we care about the California coast? We need to protect it. Let's sign these petitions.
So I went door to door and would sit at grocery stores and things like that to try to get people to sign.
So the decision to run an initiative and qualify it for the ballot in 1972, incredibly short timeline. It was all in that year. And so the first hurdle was just getting the number of signatures on the ballot. They didn't have any money. They couldn't hire paid signature gatherers. And so somebody had the brilliant idea, I suspect it was probably Janet Adams, that they would go to the annual convention of the League of Women Voters, and they would make the pitch to the League to support the initiative. And in the back, in the trunks of their cars, they had boxes and boxes of unsigned petitions. And so they drove to the annual League of Women Voters meeting. They made their pitch for the initiative. The League of Women Voters was on board, and all of those members of the League of Women Voters went home to their communities all over the state with boxes of petitions to sign for the signature gathering campaign. And they had to gather over 400,000 signatures in record time, and they did it. That was just like the first indicator of the amazing feats to come in that campaign. So the primary group behind Prop 20 was a group called the Coastal Alliance that was formed specifically for that purpose. Janet Adams was the head of it, and it was a bipartisan group. There were Democrats and Republicans. They very specifically did not want it to look like, a crunchy granola birdwatching group. They wanted it to have some gravitas, essentially. So there was like a Rand Corporation researcher on there. There were some community leaders on there. It was truly an alliance of a diverse group of organizations.
This was the opportunity for people, Republicans, Democrats, just to say, hey, look, let's set aside that and try to understand this is something that belongs to everybody. I mean, everybody has an interest in keeping our coast beautiful and accessible and not overdeveloped. And we want the community, our collective, our societal values to govern in this coastal zone.
Mel Lane, who was he and his brother Bill were the head of Sunset Magazine, which at the time was the most popular magazine nationwide and certainly in California. It was sort of the motto of California living, Sunset Magazine. And Mel had a plane. And Mel was a great environmentalist and a big supporter of Prop 20. And he basically gave us his plane. And we used his plane several times a week to fly to all over California and hold news conferences with Republican and Democratic legislators. So Alan Schroeder would go along, John Dunlap would go along, Paul Priolo, Republican assemblyman from LA, Pete Wilson, Republican assemblyman from San Diego, who later became mayor and then United States Senator.
Yeah, we went up and down the coast and tried to get as much press as we could to let people know that there was an initiative on the ballot and how important it was and this and that,
Have the right to use the ocean area up to the mean high tide line for fishing, for swimming, for boating, and so forth. But if you can't get to it because your access is cut off, then what good is that right? This initiative will, as one of the things that the initiative will do, is to assure that there is adequate access to the public to the use of the beaches.
Even though this was just a scrappy grassroots campaign without any money, the opposition took Prop 20 very, very seriously. They were going up against a formidable opposition of the who's who of California industry, the oil companies, the railroad companies, the real estate and agriculture and power companies, all of whom were donating in the tens of thousands of dollars apiece.
Well, you have opposition came from the industries. I mean, you had all the industrial lobbyists and their money involved in this kind of campaign against it.
They hired a very savvy advertising firm to run the No on Prop 20 campaign, Whitaker and Baxter. And Whitaker and Baxter were sort of the grandfathers of sort of dirty tricks and disinformation, which we still see today in political campaigns. But they came up with a very deceitful campaign slogan that said, "Don't lock up the beaches, vote no on Prop 20." which of course is exactly the opposite.
If you are a student of politics, Whitaker and Baxter is sort of like the Darth Vader Death Star of political campaign firms. They were hired by large corporations that wanted to win, and they had a very simple sledgehammer approach, kind of a Neanderthal approach to defeating initiatives, in which they would simply steal the slogan, maybe twist it a little bit, and then spend 10 times as much money to tell people to vote the opposite way with the slogan.
What's wrong with 20? Plenty. Proposition 20, the Coastal Initiative, doesn't provide one dime for new access roads to California's beaches or expansion of camping and other facilities. Proposition 20 could tie up for years all recreation and other projects, public or private, along the shore. The beach already belongs to the public. The problem is to get to it. Don't lock up the beach. Vote no on 20. The proceeding sponsored by Citizens Against the Coastal Initiative.
They're making up stuff. So I think it invoked anger and frustration in the people who really saw what was happening with it, and it pissed people off. And sometimes that's good.
We invite Whitaker and Baxter to meet with us and Secretary of State Edmund G. Brown Jr. to agree to the following basic principles of fair play. 1, a complete public disclosure of each week's campaign receipts and expenditures. 2, that a $250,000 ceiling on the amount of money to be spent by either side be established on Prop 20. 3, creation of an impartial group of 3 persons to review all campaign materials and advertising before publication for accuracy.
I don't think I ever met those people. I mean, I just knew they were there. I knew we were outgunned, and sometimes it was really frustrating. No matter, all the good vibes we had, and all the good feelings we had, and all the fun we were having, to see all these billboards and to see all these spots, and to hear all these lies, and realize who was behind them, right? And the tragedy of what would happen if they won. So their presence, I remember I never dealt with them like, could you tone it down a little bit, or could we make a deal? No, it was too late to make a deal. We were on the ballot, baby. We were going all the way.
This is all happening before people had cell phones and social media and personal computers. This was all done, this was hand-to-hand combat in the old style. People, if you wanted to make a phone call, you had to dial the rotary phone. There weren't even voicemail messages back then. And so it was a very personal campaign. It was very person to person. The level of trust and respect that was required to pull that off, people had to be where they said they were going to be.
Well, it was a grassroots movement, and I think people had to be educated. I think what I remember is that you had to have people out. I mean, these were ordinary people, but they had to be able to tell people very simply what this would mean to them. Signs in neighborhoods, a perfect tool, and the locals, I want to say we were a little naive. We weren't as sophisticated as we became. But I think we knew that certain things would work, and that was one human being talking to another human being at the same level.
There was an amazing phone tree of hundreds of people that were engaged in the campaign and their phone numbers to organize events. And for every county in the state. This was a campaign to save the coast, but the campaign was statewide. It was Stanislaus County and Riverside County and San Bernardino County and Shasta County. There were people in every single county of California that were working to pull this off. And the way they would organize their events, whether it was a press event or a strategy event, is there would be a person who would call a group of people And those people would call another group of people who would call another group of people. It was this incredible arterial system of people who were committed to show up when they were needed. And they did that over and over again through the length of the campaign.
Now, it was a campaign that was everything from kind of young college and high school kids in T-shirts and Birkenstocks and the blue-haired little old lady conservationists. It was kind of a cool, extremes of the generation gap, that worked to make it happen.
This was like grassroots versus money, grassroots versus the real estate industry, grassroots versus developers.
Well, surfers have never been joiners. It's not a team sport. So it's hard to get surfers involved politically, and once they are involved, it's hard for them to work in unison. I think the main thing that I did that had any kind of impact was that the Huntington Beach Surfing Championships were on, and I was in it. I was surfing in the contest, and I got the other contestants to wear Yes on 20 t-shirts when they did their TV interviews. So that was my main contribution, was letting people know that surfers were in favor of coastal protection.
We were thinking, how can you demonstrate, right? You've got this whole coastline. And somebody said, let's do a bike ride down the coastline. I was part of the planning for it. One other member of the Senate who was very supportive was the head of the Senate, Jim Mills from San Diego, who was a big biker, by the way. And then I recruited Sam Farr, whose father, Fred Farr, had been a state senator, was a big environmentalist. And so Sam basically took the leadership.
I said, I don't know anything about bike rides. And he said, well, just go. You had a station wagon. He says, you just take your station wagon and we'll get you a bullhorn. And you just drive down. You know enough about the issues. And whenever you see a sign that says no trespassing, just stop there. And so thank God at the last minute, Jim Mills, who was President Pro Tem of the State Senate, who actually loved riding bicycles, he joins it. And but for him, this thing would have been a total fracasso. But all of a sudden, the Highway Patrol is very interested in escorting us. State Park System, where we were going to spend the night, said, yes, we'll provide campsites for you. And Sierra Clubs, because now we had a really important state senator on this trip, was going to pay attention to getting their locals to bring the food to these campsites from Land's End in San Francisco down to Balboa Park, I think it's called, in San Diego.
I was sort of the advance man for this bike ride, and I'd drive ahead and post staple white pie plates with arrows on telephone poles to make sure that everybody kind of knew where to get to, and I'd drive ahead to some radio station and to set up an interview.
So we held these press conferences saying, look, the purpose of this is that the coast belongs to the people. We own the beaches in this state. In the East Coast, some of the beaches are private and you got to pay for them. You don't pay to go to the beaches in California. And Malibu was another visual example. Do you want this for the whole state of California? So I think a couple of photographs and a couple of statements that we were able to make not only with a coastal ride, but to point out that, we do have a coast. And yes, it is under attack. And that we need to do something to save it.
These were a bunch of people who wanted to make the world a better place, right? And that really built camaraderie for the bike trip. So they were biking together all day. They were camping together at night. They were visiting these towns and talking to like-minded people and just building more excitement, more buzz, more activity and commitment around getting this campaign passed. What they lacked in funding, they made up for in creative, spirited, public-minded events.
Almost in the last month of the campaign, 500 billboards went up overnight in Los Angeles, not that said, the beach belongs to you, don't lock it up. Vote no, not vote yes, vote no on Proposition 20.
The billboards were essentially trying to say that if you care about the coast, you need to vote against this because you're going to lose they were very, very misleading.
So we had all these volunteers and they were saying, well, we need to go tear those billboards down or set them on fire or do all these things. So no, don't do that, don't do that. But what do kids do in Los Angeles? They cruise. So we quickly just one time took all the volunteers and we did a grid map of the county of Los Angeles and assigned one person to each grid to say, locate the billboards and figure out where they are. And the billboards were navy blue background, white lettering, but the no was about this big in day-glow orange red lettering. We went down to Huntington Beach to some hippie silk screener, and we, I think for a 6-pack of beer and something, he silk screened about 500 yeses at the same day-glow orange with navy blue background to fit over the nose. And one night we met in a parking lot with a large number of volunteers. We passed out the yeses and sent them out, and we said, tonight only. You can only do this one night, because tomorrow night they're going to have guards out, and if you get caught doing it and altering it, it'll be bad, but we could do this one night only. So, but the kids had come up with ingenious methods, like a lot of them had borrowed their mom's station wagon, and remember, this is Los Angeles, there's a lot of swimming pools, and you clean the bottom of the swimming pool with these telescoping aluminum poles that have a wide brush. So one kid get out would hold the tee, the other kid get out with the pool brush and slap the yes on top of the no. And in 5 seconds, they could pull up in front of a billboard, get out, change it from no to yes, get back in the car and drive to the next one. So the next day in the Los Angeles Times, the front page is a photograph of the altered billboard with the story. So not only had these volunteers gone out and stolen back 300 of the 500 billboards, we get a front page picture in the LA Times showing the altered billboard. So that was $1 million worth of free publicity there. And at the time, there was a lot of campaigns going on, and the billboard companies were frankly backlogged, and it would take them weeks to go back out and alter the billboards. So we got the front page story, and the billboard stayed up for several weeks for much of the campaign. So it was just a classic example of just ingenious grassroots activism going out doing the right thing. They stole our slogan, we borrowed their billboards, and kind of the rest is history.
One morning I woke up and I knew it all. A new day, a new way, and new eyes to see it all.
Prop 20 was the ultimate victory of the underdogs.
They had the money and we had the energy, They had the corporations and we had the people. And we really felt we were doing God's work. I mean, we were out there saving the California coast.
The Yes on Prop 20 campaign was outspent by more than 10 to 1, and yet they were able to pull off a miraculous success. Prop 20, when it passed by 55%, which was more than the president won in the election that year.
Proposition 20 passed. What made me sit up and take notice, it passed in every coastal county up to Sonoma. And anything up there would fail if it looked like some outside group having any influence on anything. So I thought, San Diego is incredibly conservative. Orange County is incredibly conservative. San Luis is not wildly radical except for Cal Poly. I mean, where'd all these yes votes come from? And it was really, to me, a reaction against what people regarded as poorly planned or unplanned growth.
I was head of the Economic Development Committee in the State Assembly when I got elected in 1980. And do you know what the #1 attraction in the entire state of California is? It's not Disneyland. It's the Los Angeles County beaches. More people visit those beaches than all of the other private entertainment parks, Hollywoods, everything. So it's the coast that defines California.
I think the inland people is the one who carried that. When you think about it, people who were 2, 3, 5 miles from the coast, not right on the coast, voting for it. And people from the Central Valley, which is known still as being pretty conservative, there was an outcry there too of we want to go to the coast. And so there was probably a reasonable yes vote in the Central Valley for the people that understood that they were connected to the coast in some way.
I just recall going, OMG, it worked. And it was kind of like, it was jubilation, celebration that the public could make a difference. So I think the main reason it passed is love for the coast. I mean, it's sort of that simple to me.
When you ask what would California look like without Prop 20, just some of the examples come to mind. Well, first of all, you wouldn't have the California Coastal Trail. That wouldn't exist. Bolsa Chica would be a yacht marina. The Bayona wetlands would now be underneath a state-of-the-art movie studio. The Fiscalini Ranch Preserve in Cambria would be a private gated development with its own desal plant.
What do I think you would see? I think you wouldn't see the coast. That would be the first thing you would see, is you wouldn't see the coast, because that would be a steady blockade of development along the coast. That's the first thing that would happen. You'd probably see an overabundance of coastal golf courses. That was a big thing. People still love to throw infrastructure on the coast, polluting infrastructure. They try. I think you'd see even more of that.
There'd be a series of nuclear power plants on the coast of California. We wouldn't just be talking about how to decommission Diablo Canyon. There'd be several more.
I think you'd see a lot more no trespassing signs. What people, I think, don't realize is that every time they see a sign that says public access way, that's the Coastal Commission.
I think you could go up and down the coast and go look at it now and see vacant areas and imagine that if the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors had their way, if Half Moon Bay had their way, if the LA County Board of Supervisors, San Luis Obispo, things would have exploded from just the pressure. The ground is so precious, the views are so good, it's so spectacular. And I'm sure you could say that about many parts of the state, from San Diego all the way up.
I think it's a remarkable achievement to be able to take a big industrial state like California and have statewide governance along its entire coast. I think the act is probably the strongest land use planning act maybe in the world.
Peter Douglas used to always say that the greatest accomplishments along the coast are the things that you don't see. The wetlands that weren't filled, the freeways that weren't expanded. It's really the natural features of the coast that are the greatest accomplishments of Prop 20 and the Coastal Act.
Peter Douglas's slogan was that, the coast is never saved, coast is always in the process of being saved. And I think you can expand that to almost any environmental issue. You never win an environmental issue. You're constant, you have to stay at it.
Activism, public involvement is key. That's what made the Coastal Act happen. That's why I call it the people's law. And it's what sustained it. Every time there's been a challenge or an attack on it, it's the public that's stepped forward.
It's not like the Coastal Act alone protects the coast. That, I wish that were the case, but the Coastal Act is the floor. The Coastal Act is the foundation. Nothing happens to protect the coast unless people stay engaged. I mean, the Coastal Act is simply a tool for people to use to protect the coast, but it is still an active requirement because without public engagement, we're always one bad decision away from, losing what we fought so hard to keep.
You know, politics is the art of compromise. So what happens is you got enough money, you just beat the thing down until you compromise on something. We weren't going to do it as big or as many units, but you're going to end up getting something, and maybe you shouldn't have gotten anything. So politics is going to where it's going to play out the future of this coast. And politics are voters, and elections have consequences. And so the best thing you can do is to educate people what the value is of participating.
I think this is a moment where we have kind of a new generation of different voices coming into the conversation around the coast, and agencies like the Coastal Commission are now developing environmental justice policies, hiring environmental justice liaisons, starting to think about how EJ kind of integrates into all of these different aspects of their work. Bringing voices, bringing neighborhoods, that weren't part of the conversation in before, kind of adding on to that legacy.
I think that it is a bedrock that provides a very important starting point in this conversation. For us, we see everything on coast and ocean through the lens of environmental justice, and that is our unique view. And I think that without the Coastal Act, without Prop 20, we really wouldn't even have this conversation. And
it's really the public who has to protect it, because without the public standing up for it and speaking on its behalf, I fear it won't continue to exist.
Yeah, this harkens back to Peter Douglas saying the coast isn't saved, it's always being saved. That spirit of, wow, look at what we've got. Look at Big Sur if you can never get a chance to drive down it. It's awe-inspiring for anybody. I don't care where you came from or how long you've lived in California. If you stand on Point Lobos and watch a sunset, or the beaches of LA, and or setting over the islands and from Santa Barbara or whatever, it's incredible. And it's still worth saving, but it still has to be saved in an active way at times.
Another time's forgotten space. Your eyes looked from your mother's face. Wildflower seed and sand.